Trump expects Iran to seek deal to avoid U.S. strikes. Britain's Starmer seeks to bolster China ties despite Trump warning. Iran president says Trump, Netanyahu, Europe, stirred tensions in protests. Iran ready for fair talks with U.S. but not on defense capabilities. UN faces risk of imminent financial collapse, Secretary General warns. Donald Trump says Iran is likely to seek negotiations rather than face possible U.S. military action, despite Tehran warning that its missile program is not negotiable. Speaking in the Oval Office, Trump said he believes Iran does want to make a deal, adding that he has set a deadline for talks but declined to reveal it. He confirmed that a U.S. naval carrier group is moving toward the region, saying Washington hopes diplomacy will prevail but is prepared for other outcomes. Trump pointed to Iran's reported halt of executions following a deadly crackdown on protests as a sign Tehran may be open to negotiations. Regional allies have warned that any U.S. strike on Iran could trigger instability and economic disruption. A senior Gulf official said Washington's plans remain unclear but expressed hope that diplomacy would lead to stability. Meanwhile, Iran's top security official Ali Larijani met Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow as Russia offered to mediate between Tehran and Washington. Keir Starmer has completed the first visit to China by a British Prime Minister in 8 years, as Western leaders seek to rebalance ties amid growing uncertainty in relations with the United States. The visit follows recent trips to Beijing by leaders from France, Canada, and Finland, as concerns grow over U.S. policy shifts under Donald Trump, including tariff threats and remarks about Greenland. Trump warned that Britain's engagement with China was, quote, very dangerous, but Starmer dismissed the criticism, saying the visit had been discussed with Washington in advance. He added that the U.K. cannot ignore China, the world's second-largest economy. China's foreign ministry responded by saying Beijing is open to strengthening cooperation with all countries on the basis of mutual benefit. During the visit, Starmer met Xi Jinping and Li Qiang, with both sides emphasizing closer ties. Starmer said talks were constructive and showed, quote, real progress. Masoud Pezeshkian has accused the United States, Israel, and European leaders of exploiting Iran's economic crisis to fuel unrest during recent nationwide protests. Speaking on state television, Pezeshkian said foreign powers encouraged division and provided resources that, in his words, were meant to tear the nation apart. He claimed the protests were not purely social demonstrations, but part of a broader attempt to destabilize the country. The protests began in late December amid soaring inflation and rising living costs and lasted about 2 weeks. A violent crackdown followed. The U.S.-based rights group Human Rights Activist News Agency says at least 563 people were killed, mostly protesters. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has given a lower official toll. U.S. President Donald Trump has publicly backed the protesters and warned that Washington could take action if killings continued. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has also criticized Tehran as U.S. naval assets increase their presence in the region. Abbas Araghchi says Iran is ready to resume talks with the United States, but only if negotiations are fair and do not include Iran's defense or missile capabilities. Speaking at a press conference in Istanbul after talks with Turkish officials, Araghchi said Iran has no objection to negotiations, but warned that talks cannot happen under military threats. He said there are currently no meetings scheduled with U.S. officials. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Thursday that he plans to speak with Iran even as Washington continues to deploy military assets to the Middle East. U.S. officials have said one key demand for renewed talks is limits on Iran's missile program, a condition Tehran has firmly rejected. Araghchi said Iran's missile and defense capabilities are non-negotiable and stressed that Tehran will continue to strengthen its military to defend the country if necessary. He added that Iran is prepared for either diplomacy or conflict, depending on Washington's approach. The United Nations is facing what its chief calls an imminent financial collapse, as more member states fail to pay their mandatory contributions. In a letter to all 193 UN members, Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that the organization could run out of money as early as July, threatening core operations and programs worldwide. Guterres said the crisis is being driven by unpaid dues, including from the United States, the UN's largest contributor, which has declined to fund the UN's regular and peacekeeping budgets and withdrawn from several UN agencies. Only 77% of required contributions were paid in 2025, leaving the UN with an unprecedented shortfall. Guterres also criticized UN financial rules that force the organization to refund unused funds, even when that money was never received, calling it a double blow. Signs of austerity are already visible at UN offices, including reduced heating, shut down escalators, and widespread cost-cutting measures.